All right, now we're going to talk about negative equity this week, and you have looked at it generally and then very specifically with one couple.
Yes. Negative equity is a situation where people have a mortgage far in excess of the value of the home that they're living in, or in excess of. And I suppose the big concern for a lot of people would be where they're in deep negative equity, where people bought an apartment or a house at the top of the market, say 400,000 or 500,000, and it's now worth half that, and they've 100% mortgage. So there's about between 200 and 250,000 mortgages in negative equity.
A lot of them are in small negative equity, that it's not going to worry us. They're going to be there for a few years. They will gently ease out of negative equity. In fact, most people who buy a brand new house, as soon as they bought it, they're in negative equity. Because there's a brand new one next door, untouched by you, which sells at the price that you bought for, and you've paid your stamp duty or whatever, and all the costs that go with it. So, given a choice, put your house on the market, and the one next door will sell.
Yeah, absolutely. In normal situations, if you have a 100% mortgage, you're in negative equity from the start.
Yeah.
And you pay off a bit of the loan, the house rises a bit, negative equity is wiped out. And negative equity is not really a huge issue for people until they'd want to move house.
But as I say, if you bought a second-hand house and you have to pay stamp duty, the 9% puts you sort of in a negative equity situation, because if you sell it tomorrow, you're going to lose money on the transaction.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So let's not be too scared by minor negative equities, but there are people who are massively in negative equity.
Yeah, and John is a good example of that.
All right. Do you want us to hear from John now?
Yep.
Okay, let's hear the first clip from John, and this makes for frightening listening.
We bought an apartment. We couldn't afford a 3-bed, so we, I suppose, stupidly in retrospect, bought another 2-bedroomed apartment close to the centre of Dublin. We couldn't sell our other apartment, so the banks were quite comfortable to lend us the additional money to keep the old apartment, and that left us with quite a high six-figure mortgage, something which we take full responsibility for.
You had a mortgage on the first apartment, and how much was your mortgage on that at that time?
The mortgage was 280,000.
And how much did you borrow then to buy this apartment?
We borrowed 520,000 to purchase this apartment, and at the same time we released equity on the other apartment up to 350,000, leaving us with a grand figure in excess of 800,000. Something which in retrospect seems ridiculous, but at the time, I guarantee you, it was seen as a rational decision.
Can I ask you at the time what your salaries were when they gave you effectively a mortgage of 800,000?
Our combined salaries would have been in the region of about 100,000.
Okay, so they lent you 8 times your salary.
Yes.
8 times their joint salary.
Yes, actually, it was actually 9 times the salary.
When you did the sums.
Yeah.
All right. Now, how healthy is that? It's not healthy.
No, that's not healthy at all. I mean, John is in a situation whereby he has approximately 9 times his salary in a mortgage, and the property is worth somewhere about half that or something like that.
So if you take, for example, if you had 2 people earning 50,000 a year, good jobs, and that'd be 100,000 a year, and they borrowed 3 times, that would now today in this recessionary market, that would buy them a 3-bed house, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, 300,000 would buy people a decent house now.
And that is more orderly. Mind you, then one person leaves the job to have a baby or something like that, and the sums change.
Yeah. John had a mortgage of 280 on a nice 2-bedroom apartment, but after 3 years, he and his partner Aisling decided they wanted to trade up, so they bought another apartment, and they released equity on the first apartment. Although they already had a 100% mortgage on it, they released 80,000 additional equity on it.
So they should have sold it basically at that time.
Well, they actually tried to sell it. They put the first apartment on the market, and it didn't sell. And the bank said to them, well, look, you don't need to worry about that. We can release equity on the first apartment, and we can lend you more money. So I mean, that was what was happening at the time. People were saying, look, it makes sense to release equity in your first house, trade up, and everybody wanted to trade up. Of course,
this was 2006 when they bought the second one, wasn't it? So we're getting close to oversupply in the market at this point.
Yeah, I think they bought at exactly the peak of the market.
And therefore, though, when they're putting their apartment on the market at the price, maybe there were brand new apartments that were available at better prices. It was
actually the point that you made earlier on about, there are apartments next door that are free of stamp duty. There were still apartments being sold in the estate that he was in that were brand new, and there was no stamp duty on them because they were brand new.
Okay. Now, we've heard all the bad news. There's a chink of good news, and that's called, as we mentioned earlier, tracker.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
In particular, what concerns me is that when we need to move, we won't be able to sell this apartment with about 200,000, say, negative equity on this apartment. We'll have no choice but to move out and to rent a house and to maybe rent this apartment out. And the issue with that, as I understand it, is that if we do so, then we run the risk of our bank turning around to us and saying, sorry, you know that lovely tracker mortgage you're on at the moment, well, you can no longer have that. We're going to increase the interest rate by whatever it is, 1, 2, 3%, and we'd be lumped with an additional, say, £1,000 a month in interest repayments. Now, obviously, we can't accommodate that. We couldn't afford that. On the other side to that, the revenue, as we understand it, would treat us as investors for the purpose of this place, when in fact all we're doing out of necessity is moving out of necessity into a house, and that would result in us being assessed for income tax.
Are they married?
They're not married, no.
Could they each take, for the purposes of avoiding the notion of investment, separate and live each separately as their principal primary residence in one or other of the apartments? I know it might mean loneliness for a while.
I don't think that would solve their problem. The problem that they have here is that they bought a 2-bedroom apartment in 2006, and while it's a very nice apartment, they now have 2 children. And they want a house. They want to move.
So the revenue would not be fooled by that particular contrivance.
No, but I don't think it would particularly help them anyway. I mean, even if they separated or something like that, I don't think that would happen. Their problem is that they now want a house, and their difficulty is that they understand that they can't get another mortgage for a house, but what they would like to do is to let out their second apartment and rent a house. They're worried that if they let out the apartment, the bank may come and say to them, we lent you the money because it was your principal private residence. We didn't give you this cheap tracker because it's an investment.
Yeah, but however, the contention would be, and you'd have to argue it strongly with your bank, listen, at the moment we're renting because of our circumstances, but that is our principal private residence. It's just someone else is living in it at the moment.
I think that in John's actual case, I think he's okay. I don't think they're going to take him off his tracker. Specific condition in them. If you let out this house, you will lose the tracker. And if that's in the terms and conditions, that's fair enough. His other major concern is if he lets out the house, he's a reluctant investor. Right, he doesn't want to let out the second house, but if he does let out the second apartment, he's a reluctant investor, and he's concerned that the government may change the tax rules in the next budget, and gradually make renting out or letting out apartments less attractive, and that he would be taxed on the rental income and not get any allowance for the interest that he's paying on that mortgage. And either of those two things, the loss of the tracker or paying tax on the rental income, would just wipe him out.
What about doing what some people are talking about, and the banks have been muttering about this, and Ulster Bank are actually doing it, and that is they allow you to transfer your negative equity with you. You go somewhere else entirely, you carry the loss forward, and you just let time take care of it. If you find the house of your dreams, and the houses of your dreams are cheaper now than they have been in the last decade.
Unfortunately, in John's case, he has 840,000 of a mortgage. So if he transfers to another house, he's got to borrow.
If he sold up the two, he'd be subject to capital gains tax, presumably. Well,
huge losses.
Yeah.
Even on the first one, it's still below.
The point is that he gets this capital gains loss, effectively, which he could carry forward if he was a true investor, but he's not. So he can't offset it against future capital gain.
I don't,
because he's not going to make a future capital gain.
He's not worried about capital. Like, if he can get out of this, he'd be very happy. He's not concerned about capital gains at this stage. The negative equity mortgage is a very interesting product for some people. And John could have been a suitable candidate if he was in his first apartment. He'd have small negative equity on it. He could trade up and borrow more money, but he can't borrow more money now. He owes 800,000.
He's strapped.
He's absolutely strapped. He can't borrow another 200,000
All right.
to trade up.